Hi, it's Gary again, and now I'm joined by Karla Gahan. Karla recently joined VinciWorks as our Deputy Global Head of Risk and Advisory. And before joining us, Karla was Business Continuity Manager at the international law firm DLA Piper. Karla is a risk management, business continuity, and crisis management specialist. She's worked across many jurisdictions, and she has a strong appreciation and experience of the complex subjects that can challenge people's core beliefs and their work behaviors, such as responding to a global cyber attack or dealing with terrorist attacks in different countries, as well as dealing with crisis management in localized office-based emergencies. Hi, Karla.
Hi, Gary. That's an amazing introduction. Lovely to be here today, and it's been a great session so far.
Well, thanks for joining us on this one. So in the previous sessions, we looked at how to get ready for GDPR, how to treat data, how to design your processes to make sure they're GDPR compliant. But now in this session, we're going to look at what happens when things go wrong. So what do you need to do to be ready in the worst case scenario, such as a breach or a raid by a regulator? So in other words, what should you do to not make a bad situation worse?
So this is one of my favorite areas, Gary. This is about being prepared and planning for something to happen. And a dawn raid plan is essential in these situations. So a dawn raid is when you have a visit from a government authority or agency, and they will come in and investigate you. They have the power potentially to seize and remove documents or computers and to question your staff. So it's quite a disruptive event, and it can also impact the reputation of your business should it become public knowledge. So for example, recently we've seen the Cambridge Analytica raid, which made big headlines. So obviously, the Cambridge Analytica one's a very good example. That's when we saw them all coming in, with their flak jackets as if they were FBI agents. But obviously, that was all about data. So why is this important to be prepared for a dawn raid in the context of GDPR? Well, absolutely, and that was an ICO raid. So you can see that the impact of that, not only in the media, but for the people on the receiving end of that, might have been quite emotionally disturbing. It's quite a powerful impact to see so many people coming in during a raid. The importance of being prepared is, for example, the fact that it is the ICO coming into raid means that data is at the very heart of this, and you'll appreciate that all firms store their data differently, and the way you manage that raid is going to be critical to how you keep your business running and how you maintain your reputation going forward.
So let's just go back a step and have a look at what actually happens when a raid like that occurs. So what's the process? What really happens in practice?
Sure. So your frontline staff, so your security or your reception people, will usually be the first people who hear about the raid, and they need to be very prepared. They need to understand what's happening and what steps they need to put into place in order to make sure that the whole process runs smoothly. The investigators may or may not wait for assistance to come, and whether that's from within the firm or whether that's external legal counsel who are experienced in dealing in dawn raids. So you need to be prepared for multiple eventualities.
Okay, so we'll come on and we'll go through. We'll come on to that in a bit more detail later of what each part of the organisation needs to do. But what you're saying is that preparation is paramount here. Having a plan in place is the important part of the process. So let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. What sort of considerations should be looked at when putting a plan in place?
So there are key areas for each area of your firm, if you like, that would be involved in this. So your reception and security people, your IT people, and senior members within your firm all need to know what their roles and their responsibilities are in the event of a dawn raid. And you will also need to think about
making sure that you regularly test any plans that you have in place so that you know what you're doing should something happen.
Okay, so let's look at let's break it down and have a look at reception and security staff to begin with.
So these people are obviously on the front line, and they will be the first ones to know that something's happening, and it's really critical that they start to build the rapport with any investigators coming in. And that can be quite challenging because you might not know at that stage that it is a raid, but all indications should be that something is happening. So that's where their professional training kicks in, and you'll find most reception staff are wonderful at putting people at their ease. So taking names and job titles of the people who are investigating. If there is a warrant, if they are able to make a copy of that warrant, that makes life a lot easier later on. Also, one of the considerations people might like to take into account is the visibility of having investigators in a reception area or in an area where your clients or your customers might be. So think about where you might be able to move those investigators, whether that's to a meeting room or a clear office away from work areas. And clients and customers is really important for the optics of this situation.
So you mentioned before, you know, that the actual business reputation impact can be quite high, and so that's quite a good point. You know, making sure that, you know, they're out of the way and not interfering with other parts of the business is an important. As you saw in the Cambridge Analytica case, there was the press feedback and media coverage was possibly more damaging than, you know, the actual investigation.
Absolutely, and if at all possible, when you're thinking about your plans, your dawn raid plans, the team of people you will be bringing together to manage this process, it's critical that they keep that information about the raid within that team only, if at all possible, and make sure that that information does not leak beyond that team internally and also externally, because as we know, the power of media and social media is great these days, and it can have a significant impact on your firm.
Okay, and you mentioned as well, you know, waiting for legal counsel, key members of staff to arrive. How long can you keep the investigators waiting, if at all, in this kind of situation?
They may not allow you to wait, so it's critical that you have those plans in place and have contact names and numbers to hand readily. And while raids normally happen during business hours, it's not unheard of for them to happen outside of business hours either. So making sure that you have all of those measures in place to know who to call, making sure that you speak to a person and don't leave a voicemail message, for example, because the regulators may not be waiting, or they may wait but will not wait forever. So it's critical to bring the key team together as soon as possible. And I would strongly advocate that your either in-house legal counsel or your dawn raid lawyers, your external counsel, are on hand as soon as possible to help guide you through that process.
Okay, so don't panic, but make sure that you're taking some time to think about who the right people are to bring in at this stage.
Absolutely, and ensuring you have a comms specialist on, a communications specialist is helpful. But either way, make sure that you have somebody to take notes as to the types of questions the regulators are asking or the investigators are asking, the responses that you're giving, and making sure that you are keeping a record of that, at least until your legal advisors arrive and tell you otherwise.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about data here. We're talking about GDPR, and a lot of data these days, most data is electronic data. So presumably IT contacts are going to be really important in this as well. So what should organizations or firms be considering or preparing from an IT perspective?
So data is at the heart of all of this now, and for any dawn raid, not just one from the ICO. your IT team is now front and center. When I started doing this, it was all about paper documents and making copies of things. Now regulators or investigators can seize laptops and servers and take them away, although we also know that they are more likely to come in and use specific software to interrogate your data. So your IT people absolutely need to know what your architecture is, where your documents are, where your data is, because they will be asked to assist where possible. And if they are assisting, it can help guide the regulators and get them on-site and off-site as quickly as possible, which will mean less disruption to the business. You might also like to think about having some spare kit on hand, because you might also want to take a copy of what they're taking. And that's where it's critical that the IT staff understand that they also need to build rapport with the specific IT investigators and try and understand what they're looking for and why they're looking for it. They may also be asked questions.
Yeah.
So it's important that those IT people understand that they need to be factual and helpful, but also not stray into areas that are not covered under the scope of the warrant.
Yeah, as we sort of discussed, the fact that there's an investigation or a dawn raid doesn't actually mean that something has gone wrong. It's an investigation. It doesn't mean that the organisation is guilty of anything yet, and it could be a fishing exercise on the part of the regulator. Maybe they've been tipped off, but it's important, as you say, to make sure that you're not giving too much information. But still answering the questions that the investigators asking.
Yeah, and your legal advisors will be able to guide you significantly on this point, and I think that talks to having the correct team in place internally to make sure the whole process runs smoothly.
And you mentioned before, Karla, about knowing where your data is, and that's really a very much a GDPR topic that we've touched on earlier on today, and in other webinars, about doing a proper data analysis, a data audit of where data sits within your organization. Because if you don't know that, you don't know where your data is and the impact of it, it's very hard to be able to assist in this kind of investigation, isn't it?
And that is absolutely critical for your IT people to be aware of. So coming from a business continuity background, people think that once you have a plan in place, so once you know where your data is, for example, in this example, that's enough. But these things have to live and breathe, and that's absolutely critical to making sure that things run smoothly. Making these things come to life and ensuring that these people know what to do and know where the data is will make the biggest difference if this should ever happen to your firm.
So are you suggesting then, sort of, like a fire drill, that people actually test these processes out now and again?
Absolutely, and that's what plans are for. You should be testing these plans on a regular basis, rehearsing them, making sure that everybody understands what their roles and responsibilities are as part of a plan. And when you rehearse these things, it's a little bit like, I like to think of it, if you're a sporting person, it's like football training. If you're more artistic, perhaps it's more like rehearsing for a play. You will have muscle memory. You will remember what to do should the real event occur. And you'll be able to draw on that experience quite quickly and easily. And it will help you get through that situation.
And I suppose, sharing information with how other firms do it, or speaking to business continuity experts such as yourself, is a good way of making sure that you are prepared, because it's hard to work out every single eventuality in these cases. A fire drill, and your example of that we gave of sports practice or a rehearsal, it doesn't always go like that in real life. So you have to be able to react. So I guess from a risk management perspective, it's also about trying to imagine what the scenarios are that might occur, which might be things that you haven't thought of.
So, you know, scenario planning around this is really critical as well. And it's not just carrying out the exercise or the test that's important. It's taking the lessons that you are learning from that rehearsal, if you like, and then plugging the gaps in your plan or making changes or being able to be flexible around these things is what will make the difference and will improve the resilience of your firm.
Okay, so that's the IT things, and we've also there's the IT considerations. We've also spoken about reception and security and so on. Who should be looking at this from the firm's perspective? So, is this something that a data protection officer should be responsible for, or is it something that the senior management team should control? Who from a firm perspective should be involved in this when you're putting your team together?
This is going to very much depend on the size and the nature of your business, and it may well be that if there is a raid by the ICO, you do want your DPO to be involved. But on the other hand, you might want your business continuity team or your risk management team to be running this. But in any event, you want somebody with some level of authority to be able to help with the process as it happens, because you'll need to be making decisions as you go along, and you'll need somebody to be liaising with your legal counsel as this happens, whether they are internal or external. And I think that the ability to make decisions with authority will make sure that the process runs smoothly and will indicate to the investigators that you know what you're doing. So, for example, if the investigators say to you that the raid or the investigation needs to carry on over a day or several days, you may need to seal off a room and keep it secure. So having somebody who has the authority to say, right, we're going to put a security guard on that door to ensure that that seal is not broken, means that you look like you're in control of the situation, and that can really help with the way the investigation runs.
So what are the sort of top tips, just sort of summing up for a moment, that you would say are important to consider when putting in place your business continuity or disaster recovery plan for dealing with an ICO breach?
So I think constructing your team carefully is point number one, but making sure that the plan is kept up to date and the contacts within that plan are relevant and correct at all times, and that you test this plan. As we've said, the rehearsal is invaluable, and taking those lessons learned and carrying those forward and making sure that everybody knows what their role is within that plan. And some practical tips, making sure you have somewhere for those investigators to wait, if at all possible, will help. Giving them a space to work in might also mean that they're not crawling all over your building and disrupting other people's work. So as I said in the very beginning, this can be a very disruptive event for your business. So if you can keep that as contained as possible, again, that can only help your business. And building rapport and ensuring that you're cooperative with the investigators goes a very long way. They will be very focused on what they're trying to achieve, and they may come in significant numbers, and it might be intimidating to you and your people. But remember, they're there to do a specific task, and if you are prepared, you can help make this run much more easily. Obviously, don't be obstructive and ensure that you're cooperative, but remember to take advice from your legal counsel and also be cooperative the whole way through the process. One of the most obvious things that I suppose we could say is don't start deleting emails or destroying documents. That is a very poor decision to make, but it's an important one to sort of stress to people as well. And again, just coming back to one of the points we made earlier, just to conclude, it's keeping the number of people involved in your dawn raid team to a minimum, but making sure you have the capacity to manage it as well as you can. So you may need alternates for all of your key roles, but remembering that you might need additional people to follow specific investigators to make notes, so that you do have a very good record of what is going on, and you can debrief at the end of each day so that you have the best record you can.
And I think, like other things GDPR related, it's a very important piece of legislation that's made people sit up and take notice, especially of obviously data and how they deal with it, but also business processes. So things like data mapping and data audits have really good impacts on other parts of your business. And I would add this to that list as well, to say that making sure you deal with these sorts of things properly and having a good plan in place can also have a good impact on sort of reputation management and the way your customers perceive what you're doing. The fact that you can handle these situations. Do you agree that there are some sort of additional business benefits of getting this right?
Absolutely. And as we said earlier, it's not just about having the plans in place that will improve the resilience of your business. Anybody can have a plan in place, but it's making sure that those plans are live documents and you are actively reviewing them and testing them and practicing. And if you can demonstrate that to your clients, whether they're asking for that formally through audits or whether they are asking you those kinds of things through supplier due diligence questionnaires, it does mean that you are thoughtful and your business is resilient.
I think increasingly customers and suppliers are being asked for their business continuity plans, or to know that they're in place or that they exist, at least, if not actually being asked to send them over, in requests these days. So I suppose this is another reason to have everything ready, to be prepared.
It is, and while this is quite specialist area, I think it's one that we will see on the increase going forward. And while it may not only be regulators, there are other sort of instances where you could potentially use this plan. But given what the subject we're speaking about today and the ICO's sort of commitment to use these powers, I think it's important that people start thinking about and planning for this possibility and making sure that they are prepared.
Okay, well, Karla, thank you very much for that fascinating insight. I think it was, it was a really good overview of the practical steps that firms and organisations should take to make sure that if there is a breach or an alleged breach, and as we said before, that doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, but it means that it's certainly going to be a disruption to your business. If those things are to occur, at least firms now know how to get ready for them. So thank you very much for joining us and for that insight.
Absolute pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thanks very much. And if you want to find out more about risk management, business continuity, or the disaster recovery processes, or any advice on any of those topics, you can contact Karla at VinciWorks. So again, Karla, thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye.